Good morning and welcome to this week's episode of the Last Night's Game podcast, where we help those of you who don't know that much about sports join the sports conversation. And we have a great conversation for you today. And if you're watching on YouTube, you realize we have no Scott. Scott is on vacation this week. So you have a all female powered podcast episode today. Joining us is our favorite team member, Maddie. Maddie, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Maddie did such a stellar job on the Football 101 podcast that I drug her back in here kicking and
Thank you.
screaming. Today, we are going to talk about why.
Yes, we have not really discussed why sports is such an important topic to kind of have literacy in. And I just want to know why sports is so important as a woman in a career to talk about, or just in general.
It's a great question. And we really came up with this concept because I get this question all the time when I'm a guest on other people's podcasts of why sports, why it's important for women to know about sports, or gentlemen too. Has nothing to do with just women, but why it's so important to know about sports. And we realized we've never really talked about this on the podcast. And it just seemed like a logical fit since we have all these great people following us. We have obviously the rise of the Swifties who have really taken over and really taken this love to sports. My favorite thing is I have a couple of friends who have 10-year-old girls who will sit and watch a whole football game because they're watching for Taylor Swift, which is great because now they love the sport. And so I think so much about learning the world of sports is important because it's just another topic of connection. The key piece of sports, or really anything, is that ability to find a connection with someone. And I think sports is kind of like food. If you ever a friend who's a foodie, they like you can bond with them over food, and it could be maybe high-end food, it could be, a dive bar type place of food, but that conversation around food is such an energizer for them. Sports is the same way. I feel like people make a community out of a sports team. And that's why you have these people that are loyal generation after generation, or like Buffalo Bills fans who will jump through a 8-foot table because that's what they do and that's what their families do and their friends. It's this I don't want to say cult because that's not really the right word, but it's a really great way to build a community. So to me, sports is one more way to make that connection. And if you're like me and grew up really working in a lot of male dominated industries, you have to be able to talk to the men in the office. And I realized that was something that I had the knowledge of that a lot of my girlfriends did not. I specifically started last night's game because one of my girlfriends, we were at a baseball game when I worked in baseball, and we were sitting there and she said, "Well, what are they doing right now?" And I said, "Well, they're running off the field because they have 3 outs." And she said, "What's an out?" And I realized that I didn't judge her for that question. It's a valid question, and we all need someone to ask those questions too. But I really thought about, like, she works in manufacturing. What's the conversation happening on the floor? What is the conversation happening in the boardroom that she wants to be in? It's male dominated, so there's likely a lot of conversation around sports, and I wanted to give her just those nuggets so she knew enough to get by and be able to change the conversation from sports into something else she might be into. It's a
Yeah,
long-winded
no,
answer.
that's great. I think it's awesome because I think so many women and also just people in general have not been able to get into sports because of the stats and this, like, the level of knowledge they feel that they need to have to join the conversation. It's a lot simpler than that. So I think it's great that we are able to kind of provide that. And also there's so many different outlets, kind of like last night's game, that give this ability that people just need to access to join the conversation.
Right, and I think, when I hire, especially for our interns, I don't look for someone who's a sports fan. And sometimes I actually that makes me something I might shy away from because what we're doing at last night's game is, and I know you can talk to me about it as well, is we want people who almost don't have that sports knowledge. I want you to take that perspective and help me shape that message because sometimes when you've been in it so long, it's hard to do that backwards.
Right.
I living with Scott and growing up with Scott, as a sibling, he knows everything, as now know. And I always had that person to ask, but it was really hard for him even to shift his mindset to like, oh, I'm stepping this back and I want to make this more achievable and more approachable. So we've really taken that pop culture angle. And so, I mean, I remember when you started, you kind of you were not, I would not say you were not sporty, but you were not the most sports privy person.
Yeah, absolutely not. When I first joined, I remember the first meeting we got on, they were playing social and you guys were naming off all these different sports events that were currently happening. And because it wasn't the Super Bowl or the World Series, I had no idea what was going on. And since then, I've obviously become a lot more aware of everything that's going on because it's my job, but also I really enjoy it now, being able to make conversation with people that I probably would not have had much in common with prior to. So you are absolutely correct. When I first came on, I was not at all with knowing about this world, but I think it is so important that us not knowing so much is helpful in making the content for our viewers. So
Right, and I think so much of it is finding that and being able just to get started. I think you mentioned
right.
this, it's I do things like if I meet someone new who I really wanna be friends with, maybe I follow their team or I did it with my bosses, like, if they are Cubs fans, okay, I'm gonna follow the Cubs on Instagram or on X or on TikTok, whatever platform you already enjoy, follow that team because you're gonna get more of the story of the team versus the stats. Like, there might be a home run play or slam dunk or whatever, but you're going to get more of the story, especially on like a TikTok where you're seeing them, these social media managers coming in and making them do different trends and talk about their families or whatever that might be. So I think you get this better idea of who the team is and the people to cheer for versus just these stats, which I think no one talks in stats. I mean, I'm sure someone does, but they're really boring. Like we don't go to parties and we're not like, hey, look at my dessert I have. It's 500 calories. Like that's boring. Right? We might say,
Right.
"This is a really great Oreo cookie dessert. Did you know it's vegan?" I mean, that's the kind of stuff you talk about versus the numbers, and so I think people get so intimidated, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember coming on when I had watched your TED talk before interviewing, you brought up that point of like following your boss's teams and coworkers' teams on Instagram. And I think the personality behind the sport gives you a team to cheer for, which is a step in the right direction when getting into sports, which is awesome. And also, I was just the TED Talk, now it's on top of my mind, being open to like asking and learning questions was such a point that you brought up that I thought was great because some people don't want to look dumb not knowing stats, but stats is really not the most important part of sports at all. I think it really is the community, like you talk about.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I think when I first started my career, and I've said this before, I would be in meetings and I was on the executive team when I was quite young, and I still like I didn't know everything, obviously, and so I would sit in the room and I would write, like, little tiny words on the bottom of my page about, like, "What does this word mean? What is recurring revenue?" Like, that kinda stuff, and instead of going to that person who talked about it at the end and saying, "Hey, could you explain this to me? I don't have a background in this." I just would go and look it up, and that wouldn't give me any perspective, and so I really do think, and I would never think otherwise, and I know a lot of other people in my shoes would never think otherwise if someone junior to them came to them and said, "Hey, I don't understand this." And so if you think about it from that perspective, from a work perspective, always ask the questions. But from a sports perspective, I don't think there's anything wrong, and I'm gonna go back to the Taylor Swift scenario, right? If you are a brand new fan to football and you were at a bar watching games with your friends, your boyfriend, your parents, whatever it is, you got a bar full of people, and you said, "How many points is a touchdown?" I don't think anyone's really gonna laugh at you and be like, "Oh my god, you don't know what a touchdown is?" I mean, there's
Right.
probably some a-hole who probably would do that, let's be honest, but the
Probably.
majority of the people in there would walk you through it. Talk to me about the world, talk to me about this game that you love so much. You are so passionate. Fill me in on these few things. You can also listen to our Football 101 podcast, but asking those questions or you find, someone that you really trust, like, I still call Scott. I'm married beyond have not lived in the same house as Scott in a long, long, long time. I will still say, like, "What just happened there? Who's this guy? Who's the person I should follow?" When I pick my fantasy team, I'm like, "Hey, I've got these guys. Do you think this is a good move?" And so if you find that trusted person, but also don't be afraid to ask somebody. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think we're more worried about the judgment and we overthink that more than anyone would actually think that about us because you're trying to learn and be a part of this tribe of people that are loving this team. So that would be a great thing.
Right. People love to talk about their passions, so I
Yeah.
don't think there's any embarrassment in not knowing anymore. I used to not want to, like, ask about on the meetings, but now I'm the first person to be like, "What are we talking about? I don't know what we're saying about this sport, like, please explain it to me." And Scott or you are always so, the willing to explain things to me, and I think that is a trait with every sports fan. They wanna just share their knowledge because they didn't just find out all of these things to keep them in their own brains.
Right, that's because guess what? They then feel like the expert, right? They're all of a sudden like,
Exactly.
"Wow, I will tell you all about my whole history of the Kansas City Chiefs," and you make it more than you bargained for, but it's true. You get that opportunity for to share their passion. I mean, it's also think about it from the reverse angle, right? When we sit in these meetings, sometimes you'll bring up a trend and I'm like, "What does that mean? Can you explain to me why this is relevant? I don't
Right.
understand." Or I'll give you an idea and you're like, "That's not at all what the trend is about." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, explain." And so it's in the reverse. And I mean, it goes back to the everybody's got something to offer, right? You may have great knowledge to offer. And I always say, like, in sports, it's such a great leeway into so many other topics, travel, food, and, you can turn it into like the where you grow up. So like I always love if there was a guy that, someone connected me with someone really high up in AP Sports way back when, and we went and had a drink when I was in New York, and I was talking to him, and he's talking to me about, like, the 1976 Boston Red Sox, and I'm like, all these things are going over my head, and so I was like, "Oh, okay, you're from Boston, I'm guessing, so tell me about Boston," and it turns out he was actually from New York, and then, like, we got in this whole thing about food in New York and neighborhoods, and we went on a whole different conversation that was not the 1976 Boston Red Sox because that was going nowhere for me. I was gonna fall asleep. And so it's taking that conversation, "Oh, you were from here. Okay. You've been to a Cubs game. Talk to me about where you go before the game, where you go after the game. What's the stadium like? What do people wear?" I mean, all those kinds of things are conversations you can ask that then can steer yourself away if you're not comfortable solely talking about sports.
Right. Sports is just such a good launching pad, and sometimes, like, all you need to know is that there was a game, and
Yep.
that can start the conversation and be able to, like, steer into food or how long it took for them to leave the parking lot after the game. Like, there's so
Right.
many different areas. So I think that's why, like, I was just saying headlines are your best friend of knowing about sports because sometimes that's all you need to know, and then you can ask the questions.
Yeah, I love that. Headlines are your best friend because it's true. You just need to know a little bit. Like I just saw a headline earlier this week that popped through and it was Cristiano Ronaldo's engagement. And I was like, "Oh, I know he's been with the same person for a long time. They have kids together." And then it was like, "Oh, she also has this massive engagement ring that is the size of my ear." And so it's like you get into those, but you can always spin all those things around. And I really love that headlines are your best friend because sometimes it's just knowing that it happened and asking the question. What are some other ways, like, since you've been at this, like, for a year with us, what are some other ways you've learned to jump into that sports conversation and make it relevant for you and make those connections?
Yeah, I think one of the most difficult ways is trying to make it authentic to yourself and keep it something that you're interested in. And that's something that I have become a lot better at because I realize there's so many different ways that like sports connect into things that I'm already interested in. For example, like Dancing with the Stars, they have all these athletes and knowing about Dancing with Stars and then diving into their athletes is something that I've enjoyed and also talking about like Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, like, that is something that I'm super into because I was a cheerleader. Like, there's just so many different ways to find areas in which you are interested in a facet of sports, like fashion, beauty. So many different athletes have partnerships and things like that. I think I have definitely grown in learning about sports. And I think also it's something that now that I'm looking for the things that I think our audience would also be interested in, it's super helpful in just everyday life, honestly.
I think that's it though, like, once you even if you don't do anything besides, "Hey, I wanna learn more about sports," all of a sudden you start seeing it places, and it's kind of like I can't think what the name of the theory is, but it's like, if you buy a yellow car, all of a sudden you start seeing yellow cars everywhere. So if
Right.
you start paying attention to sports, all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, sports are everywhere. They're in the" if you play the New York Times crossword puzzle, you're smarter than me, but you probably see sports there. You see it on, different if you're even, like, reading magazines or you follow TV shows and series. I mean, it's so prevalent that if you start paying attention to it, it will come up. And
Yeah,
so I
it
think
jumps
it's
out
just
at
one of
you.
those it does, and I think it's a really great assessment because you start to see it all of a sudden, you're like, "Oh, I walked by this newsstand. I didn't know that it would be on top the sports would be on the cover of this celebrity magazine or placements in movies and things like that." And so, I mean, it's things like we talk about athletes who own alcohol brands, like, you could walk through the liquor store and all of a
Right.
sudden be like, "Oh, that's LeBron's and tequila, that's Michael Jordan's tequila, Travis Kelce's tequila," which
Yep.
is like the expensive tequila, but not I can't remember what the name of it is, Casa Azul? No, that's Clase yeah, something like
I'm
that.
not
Casa
sure.
Azul, I think, is his. Clase Azul's the expensive one with the bell on top, so,
Mhm.
but it's kinda just like you said, it will open your eyes to see where it is. Do you have any words of wisdom that might you might impart on people listening and who really wanna dive in as the person who's fresh off the boat for this?
I think mainly just jump in where you feel comfortable. Like, if you hear, for example, going back to Taylor Swift once again, if they're talking about the Chiefs, you can always bring up how many times was Taylor Swift shown on the TV screen, or just things that you know and feel comfortable with, like, that you can insert yourself into without necessarily, like, changing the whole entire conversation, I think is very important, and also just, like, learning the absolute basics of the game. Like, when I did the Sports Simplified series last summer, I learned so much about football and it made the Super Bowl so much more fun for me. So I think there's ways to make it, like, fun for yourself when you know the basics of the game. But I wanna ask the same question to you about, like, what you think the number 1 tip is for when people are trying to get into talking about sports at work, because you have the corporate experience that I don't.
I would say always I sometimes I would just listen. So I might walk up to the table or the in the break room, I'm like, "What are we talking about?" And
Right,
then they might say, "Oh, we're talking about last night's Phoenix Suns game." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I missed it. What happened in the game?" And be like, "Oh, they won," or "So and so got hurt," or something like that. I'm like, "Oh, okay." And you sort of just listen and you let them keep talking because you even just chiming in with that little bit about like, "Oh, what happened? I missed the game." It you are now part of that conversation. So I think part of that is really just a little fake it till you make it, a little ask the questions, but be confident that you have the right and the ability to be there and talk in that conversation. Even if you're not going to tell me that so and so scored this many points and had this many three pointers, like even you still deserve to be in that conversation. So I think a lot of that to me, I believe a lot of that comes with confidence in yourself. Don't
right.
step away and shy away from it, and that goes to any conversation. I mean, I do angel investing in other things, and I'm in these tech conversations, and I'm like, "We are talking about what?" And so I just sit there and listen, and if you're just part of it and I'm learning things as I go along, but it's also like, "Okay, this is interesting, so let me ask this question about why this does this. I'm not familiar with this product at all or this space. Can you fill me in on this?" And so it's the same conversation you can have whether that's sports or tech or food or travel. Ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. And I always preface like, really don't know what you're talking about. Could you fill me in on these? I'm really intrigued." And that usually works. Like if you're interested, it helps you be interesting. And I'm always think that like I always try to figure out and ask the questions to people. And this goes to a conversational skill, but like really truly asking the question and being curious about what they're talking about, who they are, whatever that might be, I think is such a huge skill set. So I would be confident in your ability to be where you are. And then, like you said, ask the questions, follow the social accounts, do those things, just pay attention. It's very simple when you start. There are so many resources out there. We have obviously a lot of them at lastnightsgame.com, but that will help you get on board with what you're doing. I mean, I learned pickleball and I was like, I'm sorry, what about a kitchen? I don't understand what's happening. Someone tell me what's going on. It's not like tennis. Wait, I don't know. You know, so it's like
Pickleball is confusing.
pickleball is confusing, but it's fun. And you're like, I don't care. I just want to run around and hit the ball. I want to have a good time. And so it's one of those where you have to get into it, and maybe you find like pickleball. I couldn't find the most serious pickleball player, but you find the people who are willing to teach you and willing to share with you. And what that's to me is like the biggest key is asking the right people, asking the right questions, and knowing that someone's going to probably be a jerk at some point. Like if I walked on the pickleball court and they were like, I'm sorry, you're wearing those shoes. You don't have a racket. Who are you? You don't know how to play." Yeah, I'm probably in the wrong space, and that's okay. But I'm
Yeah,
confident that I will go find my people somewhere. So I'm confident that if you're at that bar, you're at that party, there may be that old grumpy guy who doesn't want to give you information, but they probably do because they really do like to be relevant, right? So think about
yeah.
it that way of you're just being curious. And so
Yeah,
that would
I
be my
really love
long-winded
that.
answer.
Yeah, I really love that because I think it really does just boil down to, like, confidence and curiosity. If they take away anything from this podcast, I think it would be confidence and curiosity
Right? I
kinda
mean,
paired together.
and think like I said, think about all the things that I learn from you, like, all the time. And so it's not about someone being smarter, better, wiser, all those things. Everyone's got their area of expertise. And so
Absolutely.
you have something to offer them when they come around asking about politics or fashion or whatever your area of expertise might be. And so just know that that's a great opportunity to expand your horizon and add another tool into your tool belt for conversational success.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks for sharing me with this. I know it's always kind of funny to like be vulnerable and be like, I didn't get it. I didn't get it either. So there we go. We're even. So if you want more resources, lastnightsgame.com. Of course, we have quite a few podcasts that have great insights into the world of sports that will make you enjoy sports versus just be scared of the stats. So say no to stats, stick around with us, and we will make things happen. So thanks, Maddie, for joining me.
Thank you.